Friends, last time I painted this entire 1917 diorama with an airbrush. Everything received its appropriate color, and I tried to establish a rather gloomy vintage look with desaturated tones. Well, now it's time to take it further and I don't even know how to call it. Render the scene? Yeah, I like using fancy words, so let's go with that. And we're gonna start with the tank, because all those rivets are asking for some pin washes. Well, not so fast, because I can already play around with a few oil paint filters made from different shades of brown and ochre. If the paint is diluted to the consistency of a filter, aka 95% thinner and 5% paint give or take, it won't overwhelm the previously applied post shading, but it'll still change the vibe. I applied them selectively to individual panels, creating subtle contrast, and if nothing else, it'll give it a more historically accurate look, because British tanks were painted brown. Now I could mess around with those pin washes. Here I'm once again using my two favorite colors for this task, sepia and industrial earth. The latter is lighter and has a slight greenish tint, and I really like the effect it creates on any light-colored subject. Sepia, on the other hand, is much darker, thus working on darker subjects, or it can be used in and around deep panel lines and crevices to add stronger shadows and more complexity to the surface. Applying and blending oils over a completely flat surface has its specifics, mainly how the paint bites into the flat texture. This means it's not as easy to blend as, let's say, on a satin finish. As such, I had to work in small sections and do it all very swiftly. In some cases, I had to soak the surface with white spirit, which would reactivate the paint and make it easier to blend. Everything has its ups and downs, my friends. In this case, I wanted a flat model that wouldn't reflect too much light, and as a result, I had to spend more time applying and blending those washes. Specifically 3 days, because this model is full of rivets, so it's a real pin washing playground, or a torture chamber, depends on your point of view. I also did the same steps on the stowage and loose items, and here the sepia adds a nice grimy patina on those flimsy cans. But also I pin washed the groundwork. Normally I'd blend various earth tones on the ground, but here I spent time airbrushing and post-shading the terrain, so adding more contrast using dark pin washes seemed kinda logical. Not to mention, I think it will add some visual connection between every element of the diorama: the tank, the loose stowage, and the groundwork. That's like 4 days of messing around with 2 oil paints. The rivets are popping, and most of the loose items look already finished. And that's just the pin wash we're talking about, and the groundwork has some interesting mood going on. Yeah, I think we're off to a good start here. Let's now change the medium and play around with some acrylics. Some of the rivets became rather dark because I treated them with ammo shaders in the previous episode, and the pin wash made them even darker, making them look like dark stains. Well, I noticed this trick in an article from Christoph Pullings. He also made the Mark IV, and the article was published in AFV Modeler, and it certainly made the rivet detail more evident. Maybe a bit too much in places, but some of the upcoming weathering effects will tone them down again. And while I was in the rivet popping mood, I figured I'd pop some clumps of earth as well. Now, while I was constructing this scene, one of my goals was to build this textured, torn landscape from a historical photo. Earth between shell craters is full of loose clumps of dirt, and the only way to make them stand out was, painting them individually. Now, this is all fun and games on a normal terrain with a few stones here and there, but here it meant repainting roughly 70% of the groundwork. It was tedious, but actually pretty fun and relaxing. I used every shade of brown, sand, wood and deck tan I could find in my paint rack, and I made sure to mix every color with a good amount of grey. This was very important if I wanted to maintain that desaturated, gloomy atmosphere. And because I already had some grey on my wet palette, I picked out the barbed wire anchor points, the so-called pigtails. Then they received a quick enamel rust wash, and that's pretty much all they need except the barbed wire, which I'll add later. There's also a bunch of wooden debris on the ground. I looked up a few pictures of broken trees with grayish bark and used those as a reference. If I want everything to have a roughly similar desaturated look, chances are that these different elements of the scene will sort of blend together. But there can be always something that will make them stand out, such as in this case, the fresh wood under the broken bark. The old wooden poles received a different, more weathered finish. Old wood tends to turn into grayish, sometimes even black colors with strong, almost white accents. This was pretty easy, and when you're in doubt, use oil paint washes to make things darker or to add some shadow gradients and stuff. So yeah, I actually painted the entire diorama without even realizing it. The only missing part of the landscape is the murky water, but naturally I need to finish the tank first, and there's still a ton of stuff that needs to be done to it. Sadly, I don't have enough time this week to finish the Mark IV, but let's try to do at least one more technique there. And what should that be? Chipping! Let's make the same light mixture as I used for rivet popping. And let's take a spongy thingy. Let's dip the spongy thingy into the paint thingy, and now unload the paint thingy from the spongy thingy on a napkin thingy. Yeah, sure, this is my traditional approach, laying out the basic light-colored superficial chips with a sponge and then filling them with a paintbrush. But here's the thing, I had only 2 days to finish this video, knowing I'll spend 1 day narrating and editing. So how could I chip the entire model in just 1 day? Well, improvise, adapt, overcome. So I focused the sponge on the most exposed parts. These are mainly on the roof, where cargo and soldiers would create a lot of wear, and once those were done, I hit some of the other areas on the model. Luckily, if a model has a ton of sharp edges, the sponge method becomes super efficient and effective. And what to do if a sponge isn't enough anymore? Well, why not try speckling? Also with acrylics. This might seem intimidating because unlike oil paints or enamels, you have very little to no time to fix mistakes. But actually, that's not the case. A toothpick can be always used to scrape an oversized speck of paint, and besides, if the brush is properly unloaded, the effect is actually very controllable, and it sure does save a ton of time. I mean, the result isn't as saber sharp as with sponges combined with a small paintbrush, but if it takes about an hour of your time, you know, efficiency is a quality on its own. Before I went for the dark steel chips, I mixed a grey color from black and white. This is how I usually treat areas where lots of wear and exposed metal is to be expected. In some cases, I use it to add more contrast or to indicate that there's a lot of movement or traffic happening. Yeah, in those cases it's completely overdone, but I like to sacrifice a bit of realism for some visual storytelling or just making some parts of the model stand out more. And it's also a good way to indicate missing parts that would leave exposed, unpainted steel. Then it was once again about sponging, but this time with a rusty steel color. Usually I'd be afraid to do such a radical thing, because steel chips usually look best when they're filling in the previously applied light scuffs. And let's be honest, hitting a bullseye every time with a sponge isn't the easiest thing to do. But again, I went the same route, focusing on the most worn down areas and sharp edges. If the paint is undiluted, aka straight out of the bottle, and the sponge is properly unloaded, the effect is in fact pretty easy to control. Yeah, unpredictable times, sure, but controllable. As such, I employed it only around those edges, and I avoided any flat open areas. Those can be treated using different methods. First off, speckling, again. First time I'm trying this, and the results are, well, not bad. They certainly lack that crispiness you can achieve with a paintbrush, but on the other hand, the effect is quite subtle. It kinda captures that look of paint damaged by shrapnel and all kinds of debris flying through the air. So that's stage 2. Same techniques, just the color was darker. The final stage is about refining touches. A pointy 000 paintbrush and some patience. I didn't say a lot of patience, that's what you need if you decide to paint every steel chip with a brush. just a little, because there's really not that much to do. Basically, all my efforts were about outlining the worn edges, connecting some lost and wandering chips, and filling in the remaining light specks of paint. Gotta say, I was pleasantly surprised with this approach, because although I enjoy chipping, it's always something that I know will take me at least 2 or 3 days of intense work, depending on the size and shape of the model. So being able to pull this off in 7 hours felt like a huge accomplishment. Quite the difference compared to my legendary 70-hour-long chipping session on a Tiger that I made 2 years ago. Or maybe it was the fact I was chipping just one half of the model, since I've cut the other half off. Anyway, the model is far from finished, but to make it look less awkward at this stage, I gave the grey areas a quick wash with an enamel rust tone. That's a simple trick that works every time. Do you need something to look metal and slightly corroded? Well, paint it grey and give it a quick rust wash. So that's gonna be it for tonight, my friends. I did quite a lot of rendering, might be the best word to describe it, because this week I focused on making the airbrush diorama look crispier and more detailed. As I said, the groundwork is pretty much finished, except for the murky water and, barbed wire. Most of the stowage can be also considered done, but the tank needs a lot of additional work. Rust washes, streaks of rust, streaks of grime, some detail painting such as the exhaust, and of course, earth effects. Mounds of earth on top of the tank, some dry mud running down the sides, and lots of earth on the tracks. So I think that's gonna be the main focus in the next video. I also need to paint the soldier, but I'll leave him until the end when I need to wait 12 hours for every layer of resin water to dry. So yeah, that was this week's modeling session, and I hope you enjoyed it, my friends. Thank you for dropping by and for watching all the way to the end, and a special thank you goes to my sweet patrons who make this show possible. My Patreon page is like a blog or a magazine subscription with frequent, almost daily updates from all my projects. So if you want more information and behind the scenes, you'll find it there. We can also get in touch through DMs, comments and emails. You can watch videos 1 week early without any ads, so you could be watching the next one right now. I'm also uploading these beautiful studio photos in full resolution, and you also find some inspiration and references for dioramas, landscapes, and old buildings. Not to mention some small digital models for your 3D printing pleasure. Alright, friends, so now I'm gonna rustify this model and do other fun stuff to it. So until next one, stay safe, stay awesome, keep building those models, don't just collect them, and I'll see you again in the next one. Cheers!